All right, we're here at the Pier 1 building, soon to be the new City Hall. Felt like this would be a great place to kick off the new mid-rise, high-rise video series. This video, we're gonna talk about fire floor operations. In future videos, we're gonna talk about water supply and standpipe operations. We're gonna do one on lobby. We'll have a search and floors above, evacuation and roof operations. We're gonna talk about interior staging. We'll do one on RIT and ventilation, and then we'll also talk about command. We've got 3 simple goals with these videos. The first one is giving you guys a real-world look at how the functions of this operation are conducted. The second is taking you on-site places like this to show you how these buildings work and some of the operations interior. And then last, and certainly not least, we're gonna keep these short and to the point. So let's get started. All right, like I said, we're gonna be talking about fire floor operations in this video. So it makes sense to first talk about the equipment that our first due companies will need when going aloft. Of course, your engine, you're going to need your 3 sections of 2.5-inch hose. This should be packaged up in a Denver load with your Velcro straps and a 2-1 configuration. Attached to one of your bundles, you're going to have your 2.5-inch nozzle with your 1 1/8 straight bore tip. You're also going to grab your Highrise bag. In that bag, you've got a number of things. At the very minimum, you should have your 12-inch pipe wrench, spanner wrench or 2, roll of duct tape, door stops, 1.5-inch female to 2.5-inch male fitting. You're going to need a rope bag as well as a 2.5-inch pressure gauge with an elbow fitting. Also helpful to bring is your pre-assignment cheat sheet. Of course, you're going to bring your thermal imager. You want to make sure you don't forget your forcible entry tools, wind pole, pike pole. Make sure you've got some door stops, sprinkler stops in there, a couple wedges, your elevator keys. And last, but probably certainly not least, is your water can. If you've got a shoulder strap that you can attach to your water can, you're going to save yourself a ton of work in trying to haul that up, especially if you've got quite a few floors to climb. Okay, that was the first engine equipment assignment. The first truck equipment assignment is going to look a little different. They want to make sure they bring the hydroram, thermal imager, of course, wind pole, pike pole, and they're also going to need their truck high-rise equipment bag, and that's going to include a rope bag, accountability board, sprinkler stops, door stops, duct tape, and a set of irons. All right, so there's your equipment. It's not all of the equipment, but it's certainly the minimum of what you're going to want to take aloft. Next, we're going to talk about those first arriving companies, what they're going to find, and some things to be thinking about as they make their initial push. All right, so we'll start with arrival. And even really before this, it's a good idea to take a look at the lineup. Who's on the ticket? If you're an engine, it's pretty safe to say that you're going to be acting as an engine. However, if you're a quint, you may end up acting as an engine. So take a look at the lineup. If you're going to be the 3rd stick on the ticket and you're a quint, you may end up being an engine. To help illustrate this a little, we've got 6100 Western Place, and this is the dispatch order for all the companies that would respond to a structure fire at this high-rise. If you look down to the 10th place, you're going to see Quint 23, and they're actually going to be listed as the 6th engine to perform the RIT function. This is because the squad isn't on the ticket, and FAO is going to dispatch an additional company to act in their place. All right, here we are at the TCC Trinity River campus. When you're first pulling up to a campus, especially something of this size, you're not necessarily going to know where the fire is located. This is why it's important for that first engine and first truck to show up to the front door. This is where you're going to find your safety officer, your building engineer, or some sort of representative that's going to have an idea of what's taking place inside. Keep in mind when placing that first truck that you may be needed at another location on the premises. And this is also true for that engine, especially when we're talking about a large area like this. Now, if this were more of a standalone type building, it would be a good idea to think about placing that truck perhaps at a corner or in a position that you could get a wide sweep on one or two sides of that building.
All right, so now that we've got the vehicles positioned up front, we're going to make our entry into that front lobby. Truck one's here, and they're going to give us just a simple walkthrough of what it looks like to find that fire control room, control those elevators, and make our initial moves upstairs.
The first thing you're going to want to do is locate your Knox box if there is one. Grab the keys out of that. Make sure you've grabbed any access cards as well as elevator keys that might be located inside. Next, the crew's going to make their way to the fire control room. The control room is going to have a number of things. It'll have the alarm panel, which will tell you where you're looking. It'll have perhaps a PA system where you can make announcements to the building occupants. And in this case, it's going to have the ability to control elevators remotely. Looking at your alarm panel, you're going to be able to tell where the alarm is coming in at and direct crews accordingly. If you've got a bank of telephones, as in this case here, go ahead and distribute one of those to each one of your crews going aloft. They'll be able to utilize that to talk with this control room directly at locations near the elevators. It's important to note that you want to keep one person in this control room. Their primary job is going to be watching that alarm panel to make sure no additional alarms start coming in. And if so, to notify those companies going aloft of where those additional alarms are taking place. This can be indicative of a spreading event or a fire breaking out on a different level. Okay, so as you reach your elevator, you're going to do a couple things. First, you're going to put it into phase one. You're going to insert your key and turn the elevator to on. Also locate your phone jack. This is where you can plug in and speak directly with the fire control room. Once you've recalled the elevators, they'll both come to that floor and open. At this point, you want to check the elevators for occupants. You'll also want to size up the elevator shaft. This is done by looking for smoke, fire, or water, and you can use your hand light just looking up into the shaft. Next, go in. You're going to put it into phase two, turning the key to on. To operate the doors, you'll have to hold the button down. Once the doors are fully closed, you can release the button and select the floor you want to go to. The car will move to the floor you've selected, and then the doors will stay closed until you push the button to open the doors. In order for the doors to stay open, you'll have to hold them open. You can utilize the peek function, which is just holding the doors momentarily, and it'll give you a brief look of what's going on that floor if you want to check for smoke or combustion. If you're ready to go out onto the floor, hold the doors open until they stay open. You'll want to then hold the elevator to that floor so as you don't get stranded without a way back down. Simply turn the key to hold, and then you can exit the elevator. When you're ready to head back down, go back in the car and move the key to on. Select the floor you want to go to, and then hold the close door button. Remember, you've got to hold the button down until the doors close completely. If after selecting your floor and en route you want to cancel, hit the Call Cancel button. This will take you to the next nearest floor. If you'd like to communicate with lobby while in the elevator, you can utilize the phone by plugging it into the jack and speaking directly to lobby control. Again, when exiting the elevator, hold the button down completely until the doors open, and if you're done using the car, move the key to off. Remove the key and exit the elevator. To put the elevator back into normal operation, reinsert the key, turn the key to bypass, and then to off.
All right, so we've taken care of all of the stuff that we need to do prior to going aloft. Now we're going to start talking about the tactics we'll utilize once we get up there. Captain Keaton is going to talk to us about those tactics. We've got the stairwell stretch and the hallway stretch, and he's going to go over both.
The hallway stretch is used for fires confined to the room of origin, primarily in residential high-rise buildings. The hallway needs to be a tenable environment, an atmosphere free enough of smoke that the truck company can begin high-rise truck functions on the fire floor while the hose line is being prepared and stretched dry to the fire apartment. The first steps at any automatic alarm or high-rise fire is for the suppression group to gather their high-rise equipment, assess the alarm panel, and talk to building representatives. Once the floor is identified, the crew will ascend to the floor below the fire. The suppression engine will drop all hose and tools at drop point 1, which should be out of the stairwell if possible. The hose should be oriented on the floor with the nozzle closest to the door and straps alternating 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. The engine officer should assess the reported floor with the truck company. The officer's job is to determine which hose lay will be used, where the fire is located, and how much hose the engine crew will need. The engine crew remains at drop point 1, begins preparing the hose packs by connecting the couplings and unstrapping the Velcro. The engine crew should begin with 3 sections, but be prepared to hook up all 5 or 6 sections if called for. Meanwhile, the standpipe control engineer will begin preparing the standpipe. First, remove the cap. Feel for any obstructions, then open the valve to check for water and to flush the standpipe. Now the engineer will hook up the pressure gauge to the standpipe. Once the engine officer returns with the plan of a hallway stretch and the standpipe is ready for fire attack, the nozzle man will shoulder the first section and the officer will shoulder the second section. They will ascend to drop point 2. The doorman will help the hose up the stairwell and hand the female coupling to the engineer to be hooked up. Drop point 2 should be at the fire floor, either in the hallway or at the landing. Here's where the officer will drop their hose pack. The nozzle man will take the nozzle section to the fire apartment. They need to locate the hinge side of the door and drop the hose pack on the hinge side. In this stretch, the fire apartment is the open door. The officer will find the center of the high-rise hose and stretch it down the hallway in the direction that the hose will be on the hinge side of the door when making fire attack. In this frame, the fire apartment is the closed door. Notice the hose stretched behind the engine crew. Now the crew will call for the attack line to be charged, mask up, flow water to set the pressure, and make entry. Remember, the truck company will be working on this floor to control flow paths, notify residents, and search apartments. They will enter the fire apartment behind the engine crew and search away from the nozzle. To charge the attack line, the standpipe control engineer will open the valve fully. Once the nozzle man begins to flow water in the hallway, the engineer can gate down the valve to the desired pressure, 70 psi for 150 feet, 80 psi for 200 feet, and so on. The stairwell stretch is used when an untenable environment is met as soon as you enter the reported fire floor, or an open floor design with no compartmentalization. Smoke and/or fire conditions require having to breathe air and possibly fight your way through the floor. The first steps at any automatic alarm or high-rise fire is for the suppression group to gather their high-rise equipment, assess the alarm panel, and talk to building representatives. Once the floor is identified, the crew will ascend to the floor below the fire, drop point 1. The suppression engine will drop all hose and tools at drop point 1, which should be out of the stairwell if possible. The hose should be oriented on the floor with the nozzle closest to the door and the straps alternating 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. The engine officer should assess the reported floor with the truck company. The officer's job is to determine which hose lay will be used, where the fire is located, and how much hose will his engine crew need. The engine crew remains at drop point 1 and begins preparing the hose packs by connecting couplings and unstrapping the Velcro. The engine crew should begin with 3 sections, but be prepared to hook up all 5 or 6 sections if called for. Meanwhile, the standpipe control engineer will begin preparing the standpipe. First, remove the cap. Feel for any obstructions, then open the valve to check for water and to flush the standpipe. Now the engineer will hook up the pressure gauge to the standpipe. Once the engine officer returns with a plan of a stairwell stretch and the standpipe is ready for fire attack, the nozzle man will shoulder the first section and proceed up the stairs. The officer will follow, helping the hose up the stairwell. At drop point 2, the nozzle man will drop his hose pack, then lock in the nozzle in a position to be clear of the outward door swing. The officer will lock in the second position with a run of hose to the landing above. The officer must remain in that position, securing the hose until it is charged. Once the 2 positions are locked in, the doorman will pull all the excess hose back down the stairs, making sure the attack line is around the outer part of the stairwell. The suppression team will continue to work all excess hose to the hallway of the floor below the fire. Now the crew will call for the attack line to be charged, mask up, flow water to set the pressure, and prepare to make entry. To charge the attack line, the standpipe control engineer will open the valve fully. Once the nozzle man begins to flow water in the stairwell, the engineer can gate the valve down to the desired pressure, 70 psi for 150 feet, 80 psi for 200 feet, and so on. Remember, a stairwell stretch is manpower and labor intensive. All members of the suppression team will be masked up, working in the stairwell in a coordinated manner to advance the attack line. Firefighters will need to be positioned along the attack line to manage elevation changes, corners, and pinch points, as well as be ready to move up when needed. When the suppression team is ready to make a fire attack, they will enter the fire floor in a crouched position, ready to flow water while moving. Remember the nozzle forward techniques.
All right, so there you've got it, fire floor operations. We went over the equipment we're gonna need before we go up. We talked about arrival sequences, finding that fire control room, controlling the elevators, and the tactics we're gonna utilize once we get up to the fire floor. Take a minute, read through your SOP on this. There's a lot of great information there, and everything we put in this video was pulled from that SOP. If you guys liked this video, if you found it to be helpful, hit that notifications button, hit the subscribe button. That way you'll always get the next one coming out. Check out the description of this video. I've put a link there to download a cheat sheet that's really helpful in reminding us on all the things that we need to do when we first show up. Thanks again. We'll see you guys on the next one.